Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to Terrible Podcast, Season 9, Episode 132. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thank you for tuning in this Tuesday. It is Camp Week, Dave Bryan. We have survived the offseason. I'm not sure how we did it, but the report day is 48 hours from now.
Absolutely, and this is always the toughest part of the off season, for us in the site and all, finding stuff to talk about. But I think we did a pretty good job overall of trying to fill the time. And to me, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm getting, another year older, but it seemed to tick off the calendar a little bit quicker these last 5.5 weeks or so. Of course, I had a little mini vacation in there to help break it up on top of it, and several doctor's appointments in addition. But yeah, thank goodness it's finally here, and Thursday is report day. And I don't know about you, and I don't know about listeners and readers of the site, but I hope they're ready for us to really thoroughly break down that first preseason game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because I can't wait to get into that and find some kind of newer stuff to talk about.
How do you prepare to camp? Anything special do you do to kind of get the finishing touches ready before this thing starts up? Anything in particular?
Clean up my computer as best as I can. Unlike you, I don't have to go anywhere, so it's just trying to get some semblance of organization, which for me is tough when it comes to a computer, and all distractions, and make sure the computer's running good and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Good deal. Yeah. The biggest thing for me is just memorizing the roster. It's kind of like my pre-camp ritual, so that way you don't have to try to look up who a player is and what number it is. So that was the big thing for me. And McLuhan is good to go, and so are we. So
you need some flashcards, right?
I really should. Yeah, it feels like I'm back in 8th grade, Algebra 1 or something. But it's all good to go, and the players report on Thursday. And I just real briefly off the top, we're going to talk about TJ Watt here in a second. I know we've mentioned this topic before, but this team, again, I'm knock on wood here because people will yell at me for jinxing it, really feels like they're in good health, and that's just a good way to start the year. It doesn't guarantee it's going to stay that way, but it's just a really good way to start this thing off.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the offseason as a whole, obviously, I'm sure not a lot of people were rooting for Antonio Brown, for things to go down that way. The offseason free agent signings were about the level that we expect from the organization over the years. But, really from the start of the new league year, once the Brown trade went through, we all knew Le'Veon Bell wasn't going to come back, and there were the few Twitter faux pas, if you will, I guess, at the start of the Steelers OTA sessions and all. But that's minor compared to what we've been having to write about and talk about in past off seasons. And I think overall, how would you grade this Steelers offseason to date? Health plays a big role in that. We don't know what kind of surprises we're going to get on Thursday after the conditioning test is run and once the PUP list is announced. It just seems like every year, you don't want to jinx it. You go into it saying, oh yeah, they're healthy. There's not going to be anybody on this list, and lo and behold, there's one or two names on it that you didn't expect. Those kind of things. But as a whole, how would you rate this Steelers offseason to date, and typically or specifically from the start of the new league year in March until now?
Well, I guess it's hard to put a grade to it, but I would just say they've made the best of a bad situation. I'm not going to try to pretend like this team got better by losing Antonio Brown or having to trade Antonio Brown and then Bell walking. Bell, you kind of managed and you played without him last year, so it doesn't matter as much. But obviously losing AB, your worst team anytime that you get rid of the best receiver in the football. But I think all the pieces they've done to try to replace him and upgrade the defense, and I thought they had a good draft and, again, a quiet, drama-free, mostly offseason. I don't know what that would translate to in terms of a grade, like a B-. I don't know, but I just think that they've done about as good a job as you can dealing with all they've had to deal with.
Yeah, and if they can get through, we'll see how exciting Arrival Day is. Personally, I'm the get off my lawn guy. I hope it's very, very low key, and just all we're doing is sitting there processing player interviews and any other news that goes
You
along
just
with.
want like 90 Toyota Camrys pulling up, and just that's it. Nobody, just all to say, just beige Toyota Camrys pulling up.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not that much of a fuddy-duddy, but like I've said several times, it would be nice, just have the kind of low-key, no grand entrances, if you will, no helicopters and no skydiving in and that kind of thing. But overall, look, I mean, you put it best. I mean, you can't. The team lost a key piece in Antonio Brown, and it'll be interesting to see how the offense is able to perform. But I mean, had they not got Antonio or not dealt Antonio Brown, would they have been able to draft Devin Bush? Sure, you could have come up with ways that they probably could have worked a trade to do that, but getting those picks for Brown helped obviously facilitate that. And after going through all the top draft picks and looking at Diontae Johnson and Justin Lane, I mean, you have to feel I think overall optimism outside of losing a great player in Antonio Brown, the way things have transpired from March until now.
I think that's well said. And then to fast forward to now talking about the pup, you're right. I mean, somebody's likely to start the year on pup. I just had the article yesterday. I went through something that you wrote last year, Dave, where you've did the legwork of going through every year to see what players started on pup under Mike Tomlin, and at least one guy started on pup every single year since Tomlin got hired in 2007. So I expect there to be somebody. I don't know who it's going to be. Could be Gerald Hawkins. Could be somebody that popped up over these last 6 weeks. But relatively speaking, it's all probably going to be just minor stuff.
Hopefully.
Yep. So let's go to TJ Watt. He cracks the top NFL Top 100 at number 93, which I didn't realize they were doing the NFL Top 100 right now until I saw the news. So, and I think it's good that and deserved that Watt's in the top 100. And I think I'll echo what a lot of Steeler fans have said. I think this time next year, he's PPC and TJ Watt in the top 50 of this thing.
Yeah, very possibly could. I mean, and you would hope. I mean, that would mean that he had a fantastic season, a fantastic third season. And boy, I mean, when you go back, we already dissected the forced fumbles that he had, 6 of those. You just wish that the Steelers would have pounced on a few more of those last year. But I mean, with the season that he had, is he ranked too low on this year's list, or is that right?
I think it's just whenever you're a second-year guy and you just had your big breakout year, that's just kind of how it goes. I mean, maybe it is a little too low, but just the fact that he's in there, being recognized by his peers to even be on that list, I think just speaks to the league taking notice. And having the last name Watt doesn't help either.
Doesn't help or hurt?
Well, it doesn't help to at least get you noticed and people
okay.
be aware of who you are. And I think maybe in the future it'll help him get up a little bit higher on the list too.
All right, such a subjective thing that's absolutely meaningless. But I mean, I tune in for it, and a lot of people do tune in for it. How many other players are going to crack this list? I mean, we obviously know Ben Roethlisberger will be on the list. Cameron Hayward, you would probably expect to be on this list this year again.
David
DeCastro, Marquise Pouncey possibly, right?
Pouncey wasn't on there last year, though. Pouncey always gets snubbed on these things. He gets no respect.
You sure he wasn't on there last year?
Was he not on there?
I thought for sure he was.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong on that. I remember a couple years ago he did get snubbed. I don't know.
I'll have to look. I thought he was on the list last year.
I'm looking at your article. The Steelers had 6 players selected in the top 100 in 2018. AB at number 2, Bell at 5, Bennett 18, DeCastro 44, Shazier 47, and Hayward at 48.
Okay, maybe Pouncey wasn't on there. My bad.
Yeah. You did say James Conner. They did tease that Conner's going to make the top 100, correct?
Yeah, they teased it, but it's not for sure. But I mean, if you're going to put out a little video, vignette like that a couple of weeks ago, you would think. Okay, so Roethlisberger, Cameron Hayward, you would think David DeCastro. Obviously, Watt's already on there. Maybe Pouncey, Conner, Juju. Villanueva going to crack it?
I doubt it. He should, but I doubt it.
Okay, so that's kind of what we'll be monitoring and writing about the rest of the way here.
Yep, but like I said, I think we'll see Watt much, much higher than 93 when you do the list for 2020. Dave, Joe Haden was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, and a pretty good interview. A lot to talk about. I know that you wrote a lot about that interview, and Matthew and I as well. What was the number one thing you took away from Haden sit down with Rich Eisen?
He revealed that he's going to not, and probably not a huge surprise, and maybe he doesn't know for sure. Maybe he was just going along with, trying to provide some fodder. But he's expecting to cover Odell Beckham Jr. and shadow him around this season when in the two games that the Steelers play the Browns, and obviously those games this year are a lot further off than normally. They meet week 10 or week 11, something like that, and then 2 weeks later they play again in Pittsburgh. There, Joe Haden's done a lot of his training out at UCLA this year, and he's good friends with Odell Beckham Jr. and Odell was out there training with him, but he did make it a point to say that those two didn't do any one-on-one drills against each other because they are going up against each other this year. Don't want to give any of their tells away or secrets away, that kind of thing. But I would say maybe the number one takeaway was him saying that he's going to be trailing Odell Beckham around a lot this year. And normally that's not the Steelers' MO, for the most part. But, you could see it happening probably a little bit more this year against the team's number one wide receiver. But look, make no mistake about it, they got Jarvis Landry over there. They got a lot of weapons over there on offense. Yep. As the media keeps reminding us throughout this offseason here. So that would be the number one thing. Boy, it's fun to look at. He's working out with that footwork king, Joe Haden is this offseason, and all those videos, working on the footwork and all like that. And those have been fun to scroll through on the Twitter machine the last several weeks.
And he also in that interview talked about the importance of footwork because of the crackdown and pass interference and how much harder it is for the defense to play these guys and how frequently DPI gets called, that it's all about really mirroring the receiver and playing clean and having great footwork to be able to do that. So at his age, turning 30 and just knowing the way the league's going, footwork is always been critical for cornerbacks, but even more so now. So that's really important. In terms of shadowing him, I that wouldn't surprise me. And at least they shadowed Joe Haden with the number one receiver a ton last year. And obviously Steven Nelson is going to be an upgrade, so you have some more flexibility, maybe some more options. But Haden shadowed a ton last year, and wouldn't surprise me to have that be the same this year.
Yeah, and like I said, we've got a long way to go until those two teams meet for the first time this year, but interesting to see how Steven Nelson works in. And when you go back, really, Odell and Haden have only faced off one time in the NFL against each other. I think that was 2016, and when Odell was with the Giants, obviously, and Odell had a pretty big game overall in that matchup. I think something like 6 or 7 catches for like 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think. How many? 4 for I forget how many yards, and a touchdown came with Haden specifically in coverage. I have the highlights of every catch that Odell made in that game in that post that I did, talking about how Haden's going to shadow Odell this year. So should be an interesting matchup for sure.
Yeah. Anything else from Haden? I know we talked about Devin Bush and how he's excited to see him. Everybody's excited to see Devin Bush and what he can offer in camp.
Yeah, he had that to say, and what else did he talk about in that interview? I'm trying to scroll through my notes here. The pass interference calls and talking about how maybe the defense will start getting a few calls with this OPI now being part of the review process and all. And obviously Joe Haden was the victim of 2 very big calls in that game late last season against the New Orleans Saints. The one early in the game on the running back Alvin Kamara in the end zone, which is really, really a bogus call. And then the one, the one that really you can circle and say, that really was a game-deciding moment. The 4th and 2 or 1 with right at, I think, 2 minutes left, where he, I at the time, and I still stand behind this. I know a lot of people probably think I should be a little bit more biased in this situation. But I mean, he did kind of have a grabbing tug at Thomas there, but it's the kind of call that's probably a 50-50 call. And in that situation with the game on the line, you wonder out of 100 times how many times that thing gets called. But I mean, he's obviously kind of in favor of these new review rules when it comes to PI, and here's the hoping that he has another great season. He says he's healthy. The health, I think he said this last year at the same time, healthy as he's been in years. Obviously in previous years with the Browns, having to deal with off-season, I think hernia surgery and those kind of things. But I mean, there's no reason to believe that he won't enter camp 100%. And he talked about how sometimes cornerbacks over 30 are considered, what did he say, ancient or
extinct.
Extinct, and he'll get a chance to prove that otherwise this year.
Yeah, he will. I'm not sure if he likes the new pass interference rules. I just think it's a reality, and he's trying to be as optimistic as he can about the rule change, because I think I would file that under wishful thinking, believing the offense is going to get penalized a lot more. Maybe one or two calls that will go the defense's way, but I think it's still going to be more harmful to the defense.
And overall, he didn't, I don't think, or I didn't see where he was asked anything about his contract and all, but that'll be something we're watching over the course of the next several weeks when it comes to will he or won't he get that extension, before the start of the regular season.
You still think it'll happen?
Yeah, I do. I think him and Hargrave, Alex, I think those are the two guys that I think have the best chance. And obviously the list, look, I don't think Mike Hilton's going to get a deal as an exclusive rights free agent. Sean Davis, I mean, I would think that he wouldn't in this situation. BJ Finney, I mean, you can make arguments for it, but can the numbers work out and them get it done? I would probably bet against that. But I mean, I'm really optimistic that guys that like at least Haden and Hargrave are the two. I mean, there's going to be at least one, we think, extension here. But I mean, they could definitely get both those guys done without an issue. And I think those two guys and maybe another one gets done.
I'm hoping so. I think those are the top two guys on the list. As we talked about before, I would have Hargrave number one. I think he's the one that's a lot more difficult to get done. Does the Grady Jarrett deal affect Hargrave's situation at all? Does that increase his value, even though they are same types of guys but playing in different schemes? Does that matter?
Well, I tell you, I mean, you definitely look at it at Hargrave and wonder if I have another great season. I mean, can I get that? I mean, you're essentially talking about what? I mean, Cameron Hayward money then, right? I mean,
yeah. What did Jarrett get? $464 for $65 million. Is that right? Maybe am I wrong on my numbers? I know we're both clacking away.
Yeah,
Jarrett got paid though, and he should. I mean, he's a great defensive tackle for Atlanta.
I mean, you got to remember he's an every down player too, really.
Right, yeah, so I'm saying the scheme. I mean, it's a 4-3 versus a 3-4,
Sure.
but they're same types. I mean, they're both penetrating, athletic defensive tackles, and that's kind of that'll be Hargrave's argument at least.
Well, I mean, if you don't get it done, you would have to obviously franchise tag him to. Let's see, Jarrett signed a 4-year, $68 million contract. He received $42.5 million in guarantees, of which $38 is guaranteed at signing. So that's a big deal for him. His average, what is his annual contract value? $17 million. I mean, that's quite a big number. Obviously, Hargrave's not going to get that from the Steelers. I mean, he's not going to get more than Hayward's getting right now, I wouldn't think either. So, can the two sides come to a deal, and does Hargrave see a potential at bigger numbers after this season? It might not be in his best interest to sign a deal right now.
All right. Yeah, like I said, I think if the Steelers are coming in way too low, you just sit there and say, if I have a great year and I expect to have a great year, then I'm not going to take that low offer. I'm going to wait till the market's out there and drives my price up. So, like I said, I mean, I think it's a high priority deal for Pittsburgh. I think they want to get a deal done. I'm sure Hargrave would like to stay in Pittsburgh ideally, but the money's not right. The money's not right, and that's going to be a lot tougher than trying to do an extension with Haden.
Yeah, we'll see.
Dave, the other news that came out that's going to affect the Steelers a couple weeks from now is Seattle Seahawks news. Suspensions, a lot of suspensions handed out this past week for the NFL. And Jarran Reed, D-tackle for the Seahawks, suspended for the first 6 games for, I think, the personal conduct policy. I don't know, it's so hard to even keep track of the NFL because they're so inconsistent with some of these punishments. But Jarran Reed out for Seattle. That's a big cog to their run defense up front.
Yeah, I forgot that he was still facing possible discipline, which Lord knows how when you spin that wheel, these days how that's all going to come about. I look, I wish I could explain it better, the rhyme or reason, but I don't know. I mean, I've said for years and years there ought to be some sort of a la carte menu, if you will. I hate to put it that way, but if this then that kind of thing. I mean, you got players that are not charged or not even arrested, in these situations, but yet, the league, there's no rhyme or reason to it. That's all I can say. And look, that's a huge blow, I think, for the Seahawks. That's their, this is a guy that had what, 10, how many sacks did he have last year? 10 and a half. Really had a coming out kind of year, if you will. And, kind of looking at the Seahawks depth chart, I mean, they got that big guy. Who's that big guy that plays next to him there on that front?
Yeah, I'm blanking on Seattle's D-line. I mean, they traded Frank Clark, and I know they have Al Woods, you wrote about. Reed did have 10.5 sacks last year. Yeah, had like 3 sacks his first 2 years, and then goes to 10.5 last year for Seattle. So big pass rusher, big in the run defense.
Puna Ford, that's the name. That was escaping me.
Yeah. That was a gem in him. They got him as a UDFA, I think.
He plays next to Jarran Reed in that front, and then, like you said, Frank Clark's gone, and Zig. They have Ziggy Ansah over there, but that he's kind of I don't think fully lived up to expectations yet. I mean, they got Marcavius Mingo over there as well too, and Al Woods really is when you look at their depth chart overall. Obviously, it's not set in stone, but Al Woods, former Steeler, seemingly might be the next man up. We'll see how that ultimately plays out. And they drafted, I think they drafted DeMarcus Christmas too, didn't they? This year, but I think he's probably going to have to start off on PUP for them as well too. So, boy, you take a big part of the interior of that defensive line and not have them to start the season. That's a pretty big blow in my opinion.
It is, and as we talked about, Dave, I mean, that first month of the year is so critical with New England and Seattle, San Francisco. I mean, it's really going to set the tone for the rest of the year, and you can recover from it if you start the year poorly, let's say 1-2, because you play so much divisional ball down the stretch, but it's just, like I said, it's really going to set the tone, and as you said before in this podcast, you're really going to learn a lot about this team right away. It's not going to be like last year where you kind of had some easier games or perceived easier games to start the year. I mean, you're hitting the ground running here.
I'll have to look at how the Seahawks, we got plenty of time to break that down, how they were against the run. But once again, that not having Reed for that, and I think the Seahawks open up against the Bengals as well too. So we'll get to see them against another AFC North team in Week 1 before they play the Steelers in Pittsburgh in Week 2. So huge blow.
Absolutely. Dave, let's talk about what Danny Smith's comments, because anytime Danny Smith's related pops up, I'm steering us to it. But just talking about Diontae Johnson, and I think Danny Smith may have let the cat out of the bag that Johnson was dealing with a hamstring injury back in rookie minicamp and early in OTAs where he was mysteriously on the sideline. But Smith is talking about how you better have good hammies if you want to do all the things that Johnson's going to be asked to do in this offense and on special teams.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you how good sometimes the pieces of information that we get. Mike Pursuta wrote about this on Steelers.com, and that's where these quotes come from. And I'm assuming these quotes came from that one media session that Danny Smith had right there, I don't know, what was it, the first or second week of OTAs whenever all the coaches talked and all. And, the only sound clip that we really got at that time was him praising Deionte Johnson and how he went to the pro day and it was all positive and uplifting, but there was evidently more to the story that was, you can edit that video sometimes to not include some certain things. And direct quote from Danny Smith was, I don't want to bad rap the kid, but you saw some hamstring issues early and we're assuming in rookie minicamp and OTA. So can he, ? I don't know. And this is talking about him being a possible kickoff returner. He's got to be in tip-top shape. You talk about being a wide receiver, a punt returner, a kick returner in this league, ? Your hams, how are your hams, Alex?
Doing all right.
Your hams better be in pretty good shape. He's got to understand that. I think that's a maturation process. I think he's got to learn that. And then he goes on later to say, we'll see what kind of shape he comes back in and how much he can do them all. Can he carry the load remains to be seen. That's fair. I mean, I think there were some rumblings that time missed during that rookie minicamp may have been hamstring, but now we know for sure that's what it was when it comes to that. And this is a guy that, how much confidence will the team have in Deionte Johnson to return? I would assume mostly be a potential kickoff returner before punt returner. In this situation, but I mean, he really would have to show a lot, I think, between now and the rest of training camp and the start of the regular season to be a week 1 returner, if you will. And Danny also said something else that had caught my eye that I believe it's something that I even mentioned here. He's got great hands, and if you look, he's had some drops on returns. Remember me talking about him bobbling, bobbling some of those returns and putting 1 or 2 on the ground there. He has a technique issue that we're working on, but he has great hands. He can stick his foot in the ground and change direction. He likes it. He wants to do it. That's the upside on him. I'm excited, said Smith. So, if you got a guy back there, I know it might. I know it's the kind of things that you really have to be kind of picky about when you go through the tape, and I've become more of that over the years, especially with kickoff returns and punt returns. There can't be any bobbles like that. I mean,
Right.
and you definitely can't. Even though, he several of the returns that I saw that he maybe dropped the football, he was able to pick it up cleanly and go with it after that. But you just can't have that kind of stuff in the NFL, especially if you're a rookie and especially if you're trying to be a week 1 returner. So do I think he has a potential to maybe be the team's kickoff returner and maybe punt returner at some point during his rookie season? Yes. However, I will be surprised if that's a week 1, week 2, week 3 situation.
I don't think you're being picky. I think ball security is so paramount that nothing else matters if you can't do that well. Look at Ryan Switzer last year. His ball security I thought was excellent, and the one return that wasn't a ball security issue thing, but he let a ball bounce on a kick return, and had to wait an extra second and a half to pick it up off the bounce. It screwed up the whole return. It could have been a big play. By the time he actually got upfield of blocking, you can only hold your blocks for so long. Guys defeated their blocks, and the return basically went nowhere. So yeah, I mean, any kind of bobble, any kind of momentum change, is gonna kill your return. So I think that's a really important point, and that's the number one thing you want in a return guy is good ball security. But I think he's going to at least be given a chance to work on all of those things in camp. Do I expect him to be the starting kick and punt returner week 1? No, probably not. I mean, it's going to depend on roster construction and Ryan Switzer and whatever, whoever they keep and things like that. They have some options this year finally, but he's going to at least get a chance to work it in the preseason. And that goes back to rookie conditioning, where we know that this is going to be kind of a new thing for these guys, and you don't really know until you know about how important conditioning is. But when you think about any rookie in general, it's always going to be a challenge making sure you're in shape, you're conditioned and hydrated and stretched out properly to get through practice. But also when you're a guy like Johnson that's working in multiple phases, you're doing a receiver, you're doing a return guy stuff. I mean, you're really always engaged in the game most of the time, and that's something that's going to be an extra challenge for a guy like him that's going to be counted on to wear so many hats, at least in the preseason.
Obviously, you want him in the lines, if you will, during training camp and all like that, and probably get a couple of chances during preseason in some of the games to show what he can do in there too. But I would probably go to him right away and say, look, we want you to work on this. This is going to be part of what we want to get you to, but we don't want you to worry about having to master that kind of thing by week 1 of the season. I want the concern on him integrating himself into that offense and learning that offense inside and out, and the hots and what Ben likes, and learning backyard Ben football and everything that goes. I want to see a contributing wide receiver as much as possible right off the bat. I can wait for the return aspect of his game to surface.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but what if there's an injury? I mean, if you assume Switzer's the guy and he's doing both your kicks and punts, I mean, that's valuable because it's one guy doing both, but also it hurts you because if that guy goes down, then you got to try to replace both. So, I mean, I want him to be able to do both as ready as possible, because if someone goes down, that role might change.
Sure, I want him in the lines and all working on it.
Yeah,
but I want his main focus to be, learn, get yourself integrated into that X wide receiver position as soon as possible. And look, none of this takes away of our thoughts on Diontae Johnson. I mean, still really enthralled with his tape, especially his 2017 tape. Yes, he had some drops over the course of the last 2 years. I view those more of concentration drops more than anything. Not a guy with an issue per se, but one drop is too many though, right? I mean, so if he can work, he's going to drop balls in the NFL. I mean, they all do. Just can you limit those things, and you just hope that those things don't happen in big situations as well.
And Daryl Drake, obviously no receivers coach likes drops, but he doesn't. He's kind of weird with it, but he's not as critical about catching the football as other receiver coaches. I've listened to some of his clinic talks before, and really all he cares about is that you just catch the football. He doesn't really expect your technique to always be perfect. He'll be okay with some body catches, and you might disagree with that, and that's fine. But he's a little more, I think, relaxed on it. As long as you get the job done, then he's happy.
Yeah, and you're going to be hearing a lot of that bubblegum chewing and yelling from Danny Smith out there, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, and that brings me to Sutton Smith, because just bouncing off that and Danny Smith talking about Diontae Johnson and kind of all the hats he's going to wear, it's the same with Sutton Smith. I mean, we're talking about him at outside linebacker, on special teams, at fullback, all the things he's going to do, how he's very likely to lead this team in preseason snaps. But what that means is that in order for him to do that and do that well, he's got to be in great condition too, because this guy's never going to get a breather. Offense, defense, special teams, he could be out there all the time. So I'm sure they're going to manage his reps and be mindful of that stuff. And if he's not up to shape and being in the right conditioning to do that stuff, they may have to pull back. But if he really wants to maximize his preseason and do all the things that we're talking about him doing, and he has done so far in camp and OTAs and spring work, he's got to be in amazing shape. He's got to be like veteran NFL shape to really be able to handle all that. So that's the big challenge for Sutton Smith, and this stuff that doesn't get talked about too much is, yes, we want to see him at fullback and run down kicks and punts and play outside linebacker, but if he's not in the right conditioning to do that, you're not going to see an effective and the best version of Sutton Smith. So really, really heightened for him about being in just the best shape possible so he can really maximize these next 4 weeks.
We're good, and it's hot up there right now, right?
Oh, it's hot. It only gets hot during training camp. The humidity jumps up, and it's like 90 degrees every day. It's either pouring rain or it's the sun's beating down on you. So yeah, you get put through the ringer there at Latrobe.
We're going to find out real quick who has good soft tissue, if you will.
Those hams. We'll check those hams.
And who put in what work, in the last 5 or 6 weeks there. And I think probably Mike Tomlin tells these guys year in, year out, conditioning. But until it's one of those things, until you probably go through it, you think that what you're getting yourself into, but until you go through it, that's why I don't get too thoroughly upset when you see these young guys right out of the chute, soft tissue, type injuries and all like that, because sometimes you just don't know what you don't know,
Yeah, I'm looking at the forecast, the 10-day, and obviously that can change. But Friday, the first day practice, 85 and sunny. Saturday, 85, sunny. Sunday, 86, sunny. Monday, 87 and partly cloudy. So, and you're going to feel it out there. It's going to feel like in the 90s. You're going to be hot, and it's going to be just a whole new thing. So, like I said, these players get tested. And for Sutton Smith, few rookies are going to be tested quite like him, I think.
He's going to be fun to watch. I've got his name circled for sure, because he is a guy that we expect could quite possibly lead lead in all-around total snacks. I've got the popcorn on my mind. Snaps during the preseason. That means offense, defense, special teams. I'm not going to be surprised one bit if he has 2, 3, 4 sacks. I've hyped guys in the past during the preseason, though only to have them disappoint. But if he stays healthy, throughout the rest of the summer here, he's going to get a lot of burn. I think we're going to be talking about him quite a bit in a few phases of the game. And make no mistake, we've said it several times. Special teams. I expect him to go down there, cover them kicks, and make a few tackles as well.
I expect so as well, but again, it's all about staying healthy and being available. The best trait, and it's cliche, but the best trait for these guys is availability for these rookies. The more reps you can make, the more coaches can learn, the more mistakes you can make, that'll let you correct those mistakes, and the better evaluation that you're going to have. So that's the real key for these guys. Be available, be ready to work every single day, and be ready to take in as many reps as possible and improve. All right, Dave, let's go through. We didn't get to talk about the cornerbacks on last podcast because we ran long, so we're going to talk about the cornerbacks and the safety group today, just kind of give a preview of training camp to round out the position groups. And with corner, you have a pretty good feel for how this thing's going to start off. Joe Haden at left corner, Steven Nelson at right corner, and Mike Hilton in the slot. Is that fair to assume?
Yeah, no reason to think otherwise than that.
Yeah, especially knowing that Hilton playing through that elbow injury last year, I thought, it was kind of weird with him with how the season ended, but I think with the injury, kind of made sense for why they tried to do some different stuff, play a little less nickel, Cam Sutton get some reps in there. I mean, a healthy Mike Hilton, I think, will get you the old Mike Hilton, the Mike Hilton of 2017 when he played like a really, maybe even top 5 slot corner.
You look at, and in fact, I think Pro Football Focus wrote about this morning, talking about ranking all 32 secondaries ahead of the season. They have the Steelers ranked 28th overall in there. Joe Haden, Steven Nelson, Mike Hilton, Sean Davis, and Terrell Edmonds. The little paragraph included in there. It's easy to forget about him because he plays in the slot, but Mike Hilton has quietly been doing a lot of heavy lifting for the Steelers defensively. His 32 coverage stops over the past 2 seasons are the 6th most in the NFL. So that's a good little nugget there. We know how, look, Hayden's probably going to give up a couple of big plays throughout the season. I mean, he's also going to make a few big plays for you as well. Can he get a few more interceptions and not put them on the ground this year? Steven Nelson's going to be targeted a ton. I mean, he was the most targeted cornerback, I think, in the NFL last season. So, when opposing offenses are coming out there, they're going to probably be looking his way, early and often. So he is a guy that's going to be tested right off the bat. Sean Davis, obviously a second year now in that free safety position. You would expect some more development in that area there, especially showing off that range when having to play, and get over the top to each sideline there. The tackling, going to be focusing on that. And Terrell Edmonds, I mean, you really expect, you talk about those second-year guys having to make the jumps. He's definitely one of them that you expect to see a big jump here.
The cornerback group is interesting because Haden and Nelson are kind of the same, as that they're capable of making big plays, but they'll give up the big play too, especially Nelson. That was kind of what my evaluation of him in Kansas City last year was, is that obviously you brought him over because he had 4 interceptions. He can make some of the big plays, but he is a guy that is going to give up the long ball sometimes, and you're going to try to manage and control that the best as possible, but probably still going to give up a couple this year as well. It's hard to see him avoiding that the way that he couldn't avoid it last year with the Chiefs. So trying to keep a lid on things will be really important with these cornerbacks.
Yes, it will. And pressure, as we know, pressure and all that goes hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Rushing coverage, yep.
Rushing coverage goes hand in hand together, and I keep going. I retweeted this out yesterday about you and your 25 turn. Everybody's focused on this offense and the loss of AB, and can they overcome? Even though Le'Veon Bell wasn't part of the main narrative is can the Steelers offense blah 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 this? Can the Steelers run better? my biggest concern is this, and I also put out there yesterday too. Nobody should be hoping that Ben Roethlisberger throws for another 5,000 yards this year. If he does, that means that the defense has not taken the football away, and that the special teams is not providing good field position. Once again. So, if the defense is doing their job and getting 25 or more takeaways, I mean, it's hard to go against that number that you have over the course. What was it, 16 years or?
Yeah, to reiterate the number, 17 of the last 18 Super Bowl champs have had at least 25 takeaways defensively during the regular season. The only exception is the New England Patriots, who had 23, I think, back in 2013 it was. But that's the number. You want to put a number to this defense, 25 takeaways is got to be the goal. And they've only done it once over the last 6 or 7 years.
And we've already covered ad nauseum the drops that the interceptions that they should have had last season. I mean, you just can't have 8, and expect your offense to bail you out week in and week out. And the fumble, 50 total takeaways. That's 10 short, obviously. And if they can find a way to get those 10 extra. Look, I mean, is there some reason to be concerned about this offense a little bit? Yes. I mean, look, we already said at the top of the show, there's no way to sugarcoat losing a great player in Antonio Brown. However, they do have enough on offense, I believe, to overcome that if the defense can do their part. And back to the secondary again, Marcus Allen is a guy that we really still don't know a ton about, a guy that I'm really looking to learn a lot about during training camp, during the preseason. How's he going to be used? Is he going to be that dime backer guy that kind of Mike Tomlin hinted about earlier? But quite honestly, there's not a lot on tape, when it comes to him outside of his college stuff for us to look at. So that's going to be a big part of one of the things I'm looking at during the preseason here. Cameron Sutton, you got a middle round draft pick locked up in him. And, there was thought for a while that maybe he could be a guy that plays outside for you, because of how smart he is, knows where everybody should be on the field, but none of that, we'll see what he can do this year. Brian, what's going to happen with Brian Allen this year? I mean, this is a guy that's just hung around. I think he started last year on the practice squad and then got moved up. I mean, I would say his roster spot's far from guaranteed this year. He's definitely going to have to be a special teams contributor big time to make it. We all know Justin Lane's going to make this 53-man roster, assuming he's healthy and not on IR. How quickly can he, to hear Kevin Colbert talk, they're not going to rush him along. And then Artie Burns. Is Artie Burns even going to make it past the third day of training camp? I think he does. I'm still in the group of people that thinks that, and it's probably a small minority, that thinks that he's going to ultimately land on the 53-man roster. But, I mean, I wouldn't bet my house on that either. So, you look at the depth chart top to bottom at cornerback, there's questions, and it obviously starts with Nelson. And then the depth behind there, at the cornerback position. And then the safety position, I mean, who knows who really are going to be the backup too?
Yeah, to stick with the cornerbacks for a moment, Cam Sutton's been such an interesting and almost frustrating guy in the sense of where does this team think he fits best? They've moved him around so much, played outside, played slot, gotten some reps at safety in training camp practices before. It's just, I think he's a better outside cornerback than a slot cornerback, but I think he's going to be the backup to Hilton this year. You have Justin Lane, and if Artie makes it, you have some outside options there. You don't have as many good options in the slot. So I think Sutton's going to stick inside, and I just think that's probably not where he does his best work. I think defending vertical stuff and playing on the outside is where he plays his best, not defending some of the breaking routes and playing run defense and trying to blitz off the edge. Justin Lane, it'll be interesting to see his development. As you said, they'll take him along slowly. I think ideally he's not playing a whole lot on defense this year. Burns, I think the odds are pretty good he makes it to camp at this point, but, not guaranteed either. And then anybody else show up, on the back end of this roster. Brian Allen, I think obviously his chances are diminishing. Could he play some safety? I think it'd be a good idea. Herb Waters is interesting, a former receiver turned cornerback, and Alexander Myers, a UDFA from Houston, who they paid decently, come out of the draft, but I think will have really good special teams value. I think he had 7 or 8 tackles last year for Houston and can make an impact there.
And you turn around, Jordan Dangerfield's on the 53, every year. I mean, that guy obviously, Danny Smith probably has a poster of him hanging up somewhere.
He should. That dude's an all-star, man. He lays out some of those welcome to the NFL moments in camp. He'll really hit you.
Drayvon Askew Henry out of WVU, another guy that PJ Locke, really a hard-hitting guy. Yeah. They picked up as an undrafted. So, look, of this defensive unit, you go through all the groups. I think the secondary, pick your poison. Probably safety more so concern, maybe than cornerback. But yeah, there is reason to be concerned, and that leads into them being ranked, I think, 28th overall by Pro Football Focus, at least the starting group.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. With the way this unit struggled last year, now you expect, guys to improve. You add Steven Nelson, Edmonds should improve. Davis, second year at free safety, Hilton healthy. I mean, there are things that would lead you to believe that this group will be better than their 28th ranking from PFF. But, you got to prove it. And that obviously is all about creating takeaways. I thought you brought up Marcus Allen, and that was a really good point to make because I really think he's gotten almost no buzz since the draft, and he should be talked about a lot because it looks like he's going to have a pretty key role this year as that dime backer. Now, I don't know if we're going to see a ton of it in camp because generally they're just playing their base 3-4 nickel in camp. They don't do a ton of sub package stuff. I mean, a little bit, but it'll be kind of tough to tell, at least not right away. But I expect Allen to be the dime backer, and this is a guy that played 17 snaps on defense last year, played even less on special teams. So talk about guys that need to make the year one to year two jump. I mean, it's a guy like Marcus Allen, and he's got to really step into that role because there aren't a lot of other options.
You hate to see injuries at any position group, period. But you certainly would hate to see one or two happen in the secondary.
And even without, I mean, we talked about safety as being one of the two spots, along with tight end as being potential, ads. You trade for somebody, you pick somebody up after roster cutdowns. I mean, that's still in play, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've talked how, there's probably bound to be at least one player not under contract right now that ends up making his 53. Mm-hmm. Maybe two. I mean, is there somebody out there, during the final round of cuts or whatever that's cheap enough, that has enough experience that the Steelers would be attracted to, or would injury facilitate such a move? So,
yeah.
You're already starting to see some of these guys around the league that have been unemployed as camps start to open get signed up to deals, and I would think a guy like look, they're not going to. They had interest in Trey Boston before, but they're not going to go after a guy like Trey Boston unless they have an injury and they need a starter. Because Boston's not a guy that's going to come in and play special teams for you. They'd much rather probably turn to their youth, at least initially. The only way they're going to bring in a bigger name, I think, especially in the second period, but in the secondary is due to injury. And remember, this team doesn't have a lot of cap space to work with on top of it. And generally, like they had that limited passing interest in Trey Boston in the past. Normally, once those guys turn down a contract once, they don't ever come back.
Mm-hmm.
They don't ever surface again.
Are you personally comfortable with Jordan Dangerfield being the backup free safety?
I mean, obviously, I would like to have an upgrade if given my options, but I mean, I don't. You can't present to me any options.
Well, I mean, sure, but I'm just saying of a hypothetical trade situation where if there's somebody out there that you could send a 6th-round pick for.
I've always viewed Jordan Dangerfield as a better in-the-box player, safety.
Sure. Yeah, I think most people would see him profiled that way.
And so I wouldn't be as comfortable with him playing center field.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously he's done it before, and there's some comfort and trust, and I like Dangerfield for that hair-on-fire attitude that he has. I think there's a lot of value in that. But like I said, I mean, I think safety could be a position where you do make a trade. I mean, this team just traded for J.J. Wilcox, 2 years ago? So we've seen them make moves in that safety group before, and they've done a pretty big overhaul anyway with this secondary group in general. So why not keep adding to it?
And once again, with Wilcox, though, he was a special team, not as good as what maybe we expected. And look, Nat Burry, right? Even though that was more of a early off-season addition at all, assuming they don't need a instant starter, said player would have to have some special teams background to him.
Of course, but I imagine whoever they would target would have that, a backup borderline safety, probably in the resume somewhere along the line.
I mean, overall, yes, sir. Where's your level of concern of this secondary compared to, say, a year ago?
I think they're in a better place, like inside linebacker. They're in a better place than they were a year ago, but it still has to be proven. You would expect this group to get better with some of the new talent added and just the maturation of the guys that, were here last year, like a Terrell Edmonds, like a Marcus Allen, like a healthy Mike Hilton. But it's all got to be proven. And until they show that they can take away the football consistently, not in just random spurts like the first half of the Tampa game, week 3 last year, it's always going to be an issue with this defense and particularly the secondary.
Just don't give up the big play, man. Make the tackle. One good thing about Marcus Allen that sticks out is he's a good tackler.
Right. But the weird thing with him is that, like, with Terrell Edmonds and some of those guys, James Washington even, like, they played a lot of ball last year, so there's a lot to go off of. They made their mistakes, they took their lumps, and they can improve on that. They feel like really second-year guys. Allen kind of feels like a rookie in the sense that he barely played last year. He hardly dressed, and like I said, he played 25 total snaps, defense and special teams last year, so obviously you have the benefit of being in the NFL, and this isn't new to him in terms of, the practice stuff and camp and all that, but he's really coming in with a clean slate that he just hasn't played that much football, and that's the worry with him, is that you kind of have a clean slate with him from that perspective.
Right, and like I said, I look forward to finding out, trying to learn a lot more about him over the course of the next several weeks before the start of the regular season. I hope we see a ton of him during the preseason, and I think we will.
Any sleeper in the secondary group, cornerback, safety, someone that you're saying might make some noise?
Cameron Kelly is a nice name, but you hate to use the old adage of, well, what was he before? Did that one AAF game really turn the tide for him? Is there more there? You go back and look at his college tape, and he played all over the place. He's a multi-positional guy, but is he more of just another Jordan Dangerfield, kind of guy? We really don't know all that too much about him. I guess, P.J. Locke, he sure was fun to look at his highlights, and I dug a little bit deeper than that, but not much. So, I think he could be a guy to kind of keep an eye on. And the Myers kid out of, Louisville?
Houston.
You just don't know too terribly much about him,
Yeah, I didn't look too deep at him, but I think, again, the special teams background is going to be really helpful with him. Kelly's interesting. I think that there's more to it than just that one game. I think he's made plays every step along the way. He's got the receiver background. That's going to help you, but is the athleticism enough? That's going to be a concern, him playing free safety, him playing in space like that. PJ Locke's that bull in the china shop.
He's a gambler.
He is. He'll have a couple of huge hits. You'll hear him at Get Camp, but can he be consistent enough as a tackler to break down, play with good technique, and not just to run around like a madman? That's going to be, you're going to have to find kind of a bit of a balance with him, with Locke. But I think practice squad's possible with him. 53, maybe, but he's going to have to iron things out a little bit and show some consistency in this game.
Any chance Brian Allen gets some run at the back end?
Someone said that he's listed as a free safety on the Steelers.com depth chart. Is that true? I never looked into it because the depth chart doesn't mean that much anyway. But someone said they moved him
I think I saw him listed there, but once again, is that an error? It's hard to read too much into the team website depth chart.
Sure. Tomlin is not putting this one together. He is listed as a third string free safety, but like Marcus Allen's at free safety, and there's not even a starter in the strong safety spot. So it's probably just an error. I think had Allen been playing some safety in spring ball, we would have heard about it by now. But it would make some sense. We've talked about the idea of potentially him moving for a while now. The cornerback depth is pretty good. The safety depth isn't terribly good right now. I think it would make sense. So at least to cross train him, it can't hurt his value.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we can put any more lipstick on the pig here.
Last year was just disappointing with him because you thought he would take a step, and he had a really tough preseason last year. He got burned a lot.
I think one or two of those times he gambled at some.
Mm-hmm. His technique was just poor. I can't remember the details, but I remember his technique just being not where it needs to be.
All right, I think that puts a wrap on all the positions there, right?
Specialists, just briefly, a lot up in the air. Barry's got to prove it. Boswell's got to prove it. Kennedy seems to be the only guy that's locked in right now.
Yeah. Danny Smith got his work cut out for him with that guy. You would think Jordan Berry's not going anywhere. I mean,
sure. But he's not locked in.
No, he's not locked in. Obviously, we all know the issues that Boswell had, and we hope he can straighten it out. But I mean, he'll obviously be on a short leash the rest of the summer, you would think.
Yep, and then the backups, Matthew Wright, the kicker, and Ian Berryman, the punter, and of course they could always bring somebody from the outside. So you're not just competing with the guys in camp; you're competing with anybody else that may get cut. But that's a specialist group. And then return, Switzer, Diontae Johnson, Eli Rogers, some of the guys you'll be seeing in the return lines.
Just want to overall make sure that this special teams group can be better, top to bottom. I mean, this if not, Danny, your boy Danny, this might be it for him.
I don't know if you heard about Danny Smith Forever, Dave. Let me tell you how that works.
Look, they gotta flip the field. And look, I mean, I know a kicker missing. I mean, how do you put that on a special teams coach? I mean, those kickers are. I mean, you can try to dissect it all you want and all, but sometimes those kickers are just weird animals. And the thing with Jordan Berry, we don't know how much directional punting he's being told. We don't know what.
That's a lot. I'm going to tell you, it's mainly that's his focus.
We don't know from punt to punt what he's being told. So it's really hard to other than take the raw stats, or unless we're told specifically. Look, you want to see the special teams unit know the rules better. They're not going to have Coach Darius Hayward-Bay out there.
Yep.
Either. And look, the punt block guys like Roosevelt Nix. Talking about special teams, that dude's going to block at least one. This year. I mean, it's just fun going through his all 22 special teams tape just to see him, taking the temperature of other guys, giving them physicals,
okay,
if you will. Tyler Matakevich. I mean, say what you will about Tyler Matakevich, but he can get down the field and make tackles on special teams. Can Sutton Smith integrate himself into that group? Who are going to, with Jesse James gone, who's going to be that other kind of punt? Is it going to be a safety, out there on the wing? Little things like that are things that we're going to be. Who's going to be the up back? Those kind of things. Those are things that we'll kind of not that we'll be able to dissect it completely, but things that we'll be watching during the charting of the preseason games.
Yep, and I wonder, you probably won't see it in the preseason, but I wonder if Vince Williams gets back to some special teams work now that he might not be the full-time guy, depending on how the inside linebacker rotation shakes out and stuff like that. But maybe they put that on his plate a little bit more. Yeah,
when he's been on teams, he's definitely hit the stat sheet.
Oh yeah. All right, Dave. So that concludes the position group roundup. That was all really we had to talk about today. So let's jump to some reader emails and then get out of here.
All righty.
I know you said we just had a couple. So
Jason Campbell writes in, good morning. Hypothetically, let's suppose the following players don't make the 53. I ask you to rank them in order from biggest surprise to not surprised. Matakevich, Burns, Berry, Dangerfield, Hawkins. He says, hypothetically, let's suppose the following players don't make the 53. I ask you to rank them in order from biggest surprise to not surprise. I think the biggest surprise of those names, if they didn't make the 53, either Berry or Matakevich.
Yeah, I think Matakevich, here's how I would rank it, and I'm doing this very, very roughly, very quickly. In terms of biggest surprise to not very surprising, Matakevich would be the biggest surprise. Then I'll go Dangerfield, Berry, Burns, Hawkins. Maybe I flipped the last two, I'm not sure.
I think I would go Matakevich, Berry. No, Matakevich, Berry. Yeah, Matakevich, Berry, Burns, Dangerfield, Hawkins.
So it would be more surprising to see Burns not make it than Dangerfield, in your mind? You think basically you're saying Burns has a better chance to make the roster than Jordan Dangerfield?
Yes, and that's me not giving that guy respect again.
Yes, it is, Dave. Come on.
I do it every year, but I mean, how many? Look, he's a great special teams player, but I still like Burns' chances overall making a 53 in Dangerfield. It's nothing, they play, it's nothing against Dangerfield. I think Burns, because Steelers never haven't cut bait with a first rounder, before the rookie contract's up. That plays a large part into me putting Burns ahead of Dangerfield.
Yeah, but we know that doesn't mean anything when they make decisions now. That's not.
That's why. That's my reasoning.
Dangerfield's agent. Let him know what your rankings are.
He's all over us on Twitter anytime we disrespect Jordan Dangerfield.
Who was the bottom of your list? Like I cut you off when you got.
Oh, Hawkins, yeah.
Hawkins. Yeah, I mean Hawkins, the talents there. I just that tackle battles. There's so many names. It just and he's got to be healthy, and those are the question marks. So good question though.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for that. Here's one from Paul Brown. David Alex, I just want to point out the inconsistencies in the NFL. The 2009 Dante Stallworth charged and convicted of hitting and killing a pedestrian during a DUI received a 1-year suspension. Big Ben suspended 6 games in 2010, reduced to 4 for sexual assault allegations, never charged or convicted. Jonathan Vilma and Will Smith suspended for a full season for Bountygate in 2012. Ray Rice, 2014, punching his then fiance, knocking her unconscious, received a DV charge and still only received a 2-game suspension. I know the video turned it into a bigger deal with the indefinite suspension, but he was still charged and only received 2-game suspension. 2014, Josh Brent received a 10-game suspension for driving drunk. Was even allowed to return to the team before the 10-game suspension to practice. Today, Tyreek Hill is accused of domestic violence and child abuse. Evidence and prior convictions do not work in his favor. He has audio recording of him threatening his girlfriend. No suspension, returning to training camp, and even talks of contract extension. And then he lists today, Jarran Reed, 6-game suspension with no charge or arrest. He goes on to say, are you guys able to explain to me the pattern of the NFL? Does Roger Goodell have a committee that helps him make these decisions? I believe this will be a point in the new CBA negotiations limiting the powers of the commissioner because he has demonstrated inconsistency. Lastly, I believe there should be a panel that is dedicated to disciplinary rulings, a representative from the NFLPA, an outside arbiter, and NFL front office execs. Thank you, Paul. Paul, I mean, you're right. I don't know. I mean, as Jim Rome would say, rack 'em. I wish I don't have an answer. And I don't have a good educated answer for any of it when it comes to this. Something I've said all along. And shame on the NFLPA and that last CBA and maybe even the one before that for not taking the Steelers input on this as a team. Saying they should be warned about against giving Roger Goodell that much power and letting him be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. I would expect this to be a big point in the upcoming CBA negotiations this next time. And if they don't stand their ground and get something along the lines of what you're throwing out there, Paul, I mean, they're going to be back in the same thing. I mean, it literally does. I realize everything's on a case-by-case basis, and they're not the law. The law enforcement has to do their jobs and all, but man, there's got to be a better, more, I guess, formatted way to do this. And how much is marijuana going to come into play on this next thing too? Look, I mean, I live in a state where marijuana is legal. I mean, I'm not advocating the use of it by any means, but I mean, for medical instances, and if they have these studies out here that marijuana usage can help these players with the concussions and head injuries and things like that, go for it. How much is the marijuana talk going to be in part of this CB? They've got their hands full, and I know there's optimism right now on both sides of this thing, thinking that maybe an extension can be done before the CBA ends. I have trouble envisioning it, not only for what Paul points out here with the disciplinary thing, but all of it, the social the social aspect of it, initiatives and all like that they're trying to put into this. It's going to be tough, man.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I don't have an answer for the NFL's rationale. I don't think anybody has an answer for the NFL rationale. And I get it's difficult. It's not an easy situation to be in. It's hard to be incredibly consistent across the board. And there aren't these obvious great solutions of how to fix it. Every idea has its own problems associated with it. But I agree with it, with the question that it's going to be a big issue in the CBA, and something that needs to be addressed and fixed, and something that I think the union, or at least the players that will help make up the union, are going to really push the union reps and the decision makers on that side of the ball to try to create a better situation for the players. But it's tough with the marijuana thing. I mean, I get it. I fully support the idea of players being able to use marijuana, but with just some of the, well, obviously being different state to state. In some states it's legal, some states it's not legal. Federal law, it's still illegal across the board. Like, how do you, as the NFL, allow that to happen? And then, how do you make that permissible? And then while it's still illegal on a federal level, like that's a tough line to walk. So you're right. It's going to be difficult, and I agree. I know that there are some positive talks going on between the NFLPA and the NFL right now, but I think these things will always take a lot of time and will go down to the wire to try to have happen. And if a deal gets done early, that probably means that the union caved and the owners got what they want, which is probably not what the players want to hear.
Right, and they're already being told save their money and yada yada, same stuff as last year. We'll see how many. I'm not optimistic about it. I'll just leave it at that. Thanks for the email, Paul. From Bryce writes in, hey guys, training camp is this week and I can't wait. Alex, I'm looking forward to your camp breakdowns. I've got two questions for both of yins. Out of these three positions, tight end, safety, outside linebacker, pick the one that you think the Steelers will definitely address with their annual free agent signing during at the end of camp. Tight end, safety, outside line. I'd be less inclined to pick outside linebacker at this point. You know how Alex and I feel about the tight end situations from the get-go. Look, I mean, you look at although you look at the couple of the names that were just signed off the street, I think just yesterday, it lets you know where you stand. But I mean, there's going to be a tight end get cut at probably later on in the preseason, or one that's going to be on the trade market for a 6th or 7th round draft pick that the Steelers could probably use. Safety, Alex and I just went through. I could see them possibly adding a safety, but more so if you have an injury happen, I think if you have an injury to one of your, let's say, your top three guys, and I would include, I guess, Marcus Allen as being a top three guy right now. So if you had an injury right there, then I could see. Now it's not, I'm not counting one of these undrafted guys gets a knee injury and you have to waive him injured and you have to bring in another undrafted free agent. I don't count that. I'm talking about legitimate guys that probably have a good shot at making the 53-man roster. I would list them just how you have them listed, Bryce. Tight end, safety, outside linebacker.
Me too. I'll rank them the way it was asked: tight end, safety, outside linebacker, in that order.
Can we see any other position? I mean, barring injury, no. I mean, inside linebacker, no. Defensive line.
I was gonna say, if like Buggs doesn't pan out or McCullers doesn't have a good camp, I could see that being a move. If they feel like that group isn't rounding out the way that they want it to.
But tight end, look, I hate to belabor the point here, but Grimble, this team, when Grimble played, what did I write? 167. I can't remember the total number of snaps that he played. He was a part of a lot of that 22 personnel grouping that we talked about. The Steelers supposedly led the league in, or tied in the lead in using last year. And when he was in that 22 personnel grouping last year, part of the time, most of the time, it was with Jesse James, and the other part of the time it was with Chukwuma Okorafor as the other tight end. And really, overall, top to bottom, this team did not run well out of that personnel grouping. Okay, and I wrote an article about this the other day. Catch 22, kind of a play on words there with Grimble. You would think Grimble right now is your locked-in number 2 tight end, but who is going to be the guy that plays with him in the 22 personnel? this year with Jesse James now gone. I mean, are you going to put Vance McDonald out there to play more? Are you just going to throw that tackle out, that extra tackle out there again and roll the dice and hope for the best and hope things, hope you get better results this time? McDonald's, as I've mentioned, I understand trying to limit the snaps in McDonald because nobody wants McDonald to make it through the season healthy more than I do. I mean, you look at his yards after the catch, and you look at the season that he put up last year in 15 games. With Antonio Brown now gone, you would expect him to be even a little bit bigger part of the passing game here. We talked about, we joked that his nickname is if only he could stay healthy last year. Well, 15 to 16 games staying healthy, I'll sign me up for that right now. Yep. I mean, if you told me McDonald's going to miss one game this season and maybe even two, assuming the Steelers don't need him for, God bless us, the finale, sign me up for that right now, kind of thing. But still, I have my concerns when this team goes to 22 personnel this year, with Grimble being one of them and Jesse James not being the other. How good is Zach Gentry? How quickly can they get him to come along to be the number 2? If Chukwuma Okorafor ends up being your starting right tackle, does that mean we're going to see Matt Filer as the extra offensive lineman in those situations? There's a lot of questions on the offensive side of the ball when it comes to those heavy personnel groupings.
And all it takes is one injury for any of those top 3 guys, McDonald, Grimble, Gentry, and you almost are compelled to go find someone new because the depth is so poor here. You can't just take Christian Scotland Williamson and say you're next man up and you're making the 53. Like, there's no one else beyond those 3 guys to really have even remotely good odds of making this roster, right?
Well, I mean, people are going to say you're disrespecting CSW. We don't know anything about him. I mean, we'll see what kind of progress he's made. But I mean, how realistic is it to expect that he can maybe be the number 3?
Pretty unrealistic, I think, right now. I know it is year 2 for him, but pretty unrealistic. I mean, so I'm just saying, one injury to any of those guys, so one of those guys, isn't available for week 1, you basically have to make a move. And, Jesse James is not on this team right now. Jesse James was as durable as they come. You got guys with some injury history with Grimble and McDonald, and, Gentry's a rookie. So it just, even just based off of the sheer numbers game, the odds of somebody going down is decent. And that's going to compel this team to make a move just based off of that, even before talking about talent. I mean,
it'd be irresponsible for me to go fanboy here on this podcast and say, Kevin Rader, Trevor Wood, Christian Scott, and Williams. So, one of those 3, and look, I even talked about Trevor Wood might, and I use might with a lot of quotations, right? It might be the best blocking tight end this team has right now. But I mean, that's on limited college tape. Let's see what happens here. Will him and guys like Kevin Radar be given an opportunity? I think so. I mean, you would think and hope a guy like Zach Gentry can, as a 5th round draft pick, can make the roster the way Jesse James did several years ago. Will they have to carve out and maybe keep him and keep an extra one on top of it?
Yeah, it's possible.
Keep 4. I mean, you'd hate to see a roster spot. You hate to see a team keep 4 tight ends in total on a 53 at an expense of, I don't know, a wide receiver, corner. Pick your poison there. But I mean, if Gentry can't dress right from the get-go, then he can't dress.
Yeah. So I think tight end's the position group to look at.
Look, I mean, keep your fingers crossed about Vance McDonald, because he can have a huge season, and I don't want him out there 90. I mean, I joke or say he needs to be out there more. I mean, obviously I don't think he should have to play 92% of the snaps, but I worry about this team in heavy personnel groupings.
What percent of snaps are you going to play him? I mean, I said 60% before. Is that fair?
Here's the thing in the small, and it was under 50. I don't have the exact number. The small selection of snaps that McDonald did play in heavy personnel groupings, talking about either 2 tight ends or 3 tight ends, the team ran well. I think there were like 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns. Most of those were obvious kind of short yardage, I think, situations there, and they played good in those situations. So. I mean, I just think they got to get him on the field more than last year. Whatever you want to circle that number at, It is. But I mean, Jesse James is going to be a loss that they're going to feel, I think.
No, I agree.
Let's see, Jim. When did this one come in? I think did we cover this one from Jim Bendis? No, we already hit that on why Ben's ranked so low and all. All right, I think that's got most of there, Alex. Until we can get back together on Friday. Once again, Alex and I will probably record the Friday podcast late Thursday night. So if you have any questions you want to get included, because Alex has to the first day of training camp and get himself situated and out the door and all like that, we're probably going to record that late Thursday and post that on the site Friday for you. When Alex gets back from the first day of camp, we hope to have a special edition of the Terrible Podcast Friday night as usual, and obviously look forward to those late evening special edition podcasts moving forward for the rest of camp as well. So if you have a question, get that sent into theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter @Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter @Alex_Kozora. You can follow the show @Terrible Podcast. Once again, email the show theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. A few more PayPal donations this week. We thank everybody for the support that way as well too. It really means a lot to us. If you want to hit Alex's tip jar for training camp, you can easily find that link on SteelersDepot.com as well. And it means a lot. Thanks for sticking with us throughout the offseason. The podcast listenership numbers have been absolutely fantastic, and we appreciate that. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.